The shotgun blast echoed through the cornfields like God's own thunder, shattering the humid August night and Elijah's fragile world in one deafening crack. "You ain't no son of mine," his father's voice rasped from the porch, the barrel still smoking in the old man's gnarled hands. Not aimed at Elijah, thank Christ, but at the mangy stray dog that had dared to cross their property line. Elijah froze in the driveway, heart slamming against his ribs, the metallic tang of fear thick on his tongue as he realized the shot was a warning, a line drawn in the red clay dirt of rural Georgia. And in that split second, with the echoes fading into the cricket chorus, he knew. The truth he'd buried deeper than his mama's rose garden was clawing its way out, hungry and unforgiving. Elijah Harper had always been the quiet one in the Harper clan, the boy who mended fences instead of breaking jaws, who quoted poetry from dog-eared paperbacks while his brothers chased tail and glory on the high school football field. At 25, he still lived in the shadow of that sagging farmhouse on the outskirts of Millwood, a speck of a town where the Confederate flag fluttered like a guilty secret and Sunday sermons preached fire and brimstone against anything that didn't fit the mold. His family called him weak, not to his face, not always, but in the sideways glances and the sighs that hung heavy as the Spanish moss. "Elijah's got a soft heart," his mama would say, patting his cheek with flour-dusted hands. But his daddy, Harlan, spat it like venom. "Boy's got no spine. Needs to man up, for the world chews him raw." That night, as the adrenaline ebbed and Harlan stomped back inside muttering about damn strays, Elijah lingered by the truck, his calloused fingers tracing the faded Harper Farms decal on the door. The dog, poor, scrawny thing with ribs like piano keys, had bolted into the underbrush, unharmed but spooked. Elijah's chest ached with a phantom wound, the kind that came from loving too fiercely in a place that rewarded fists over feelings. He pulled out his phone, the screen's glow a lifeline in the dark, and texted the one person who saw strength where others saw frailty. "Oliver. Get here. Now. I can't breathe." Oliver Kane arrived 20 minutes later, his beat-up Ford F-150 kicking up gravel like a storm cloud on wheels. He was everything Elijah wasn't, broad-shouldered and unapologetic, with ink-black hair cropped military short and eyes like polished obsidian that could pin you with a look. Born and raised in Atlanta, Oliver had fled the city's relentless pulse for Millwood 2 years back, chasing a freelance graphic design gig that paid just enough to keep the wolves at bay. But really, he'd come for Elijah, the boy he'd met at a dive bar poetry slam, where Elijah's verses about hidden rivers and unspoken storms had hooked him deeper than any line in a script. Oliver didn't knock, he never did. He pushed through the screen door like he owned the place, his work boots leaving muddy prints on the linoleum. "What the hell happened?" he demanded, voice low but edged with that protective growl Elijah both craved and feared. Harlan was in the living room, nursing a Budweiser and the TV's blue flicker, while Mama fussed over a pot of collards in the kitchen. Elijah met Oliver in the hallway, pulling him into the cramped laundry room that smelled of bleach and regret. "Dad." He shot at a dog. "Just 'cause it wandered too close." Elijah's words tumbled out, brittle as autumn leaves. He leaned against the dryer, arms wrapped around himself, the flannel shirt he'd worn since dawn now clinging damply to his skin. Oliver's hands found his shoulders, thumbs pressing into the knots there, grounding him like anchors in a squall. "Jesus, Eli. That's not about the dog. And you know it." Oliver's gaze searched his, those dark eyes seeing straight through the cracks. They'd been dancing around this for months, The way Harlan's stares lingered too long when Oliver dropped by under the guise of helping with the barn. The Bible verses his aunties slipped into conversation like poisoned barbs. Elijah was out to Oliver, had been since that first fumbling kiss under the stars behind the old mill. But to his family, he was still the dutiful son, the one who fixed the tractor and said grace without flinching. "I know," Elijah whispered, his voice cracking like dry earth. He pressed his forehead to Oliver's chest, inhaling the familiar scent of sawdust and sandalwood cologne. "But what if he finds out about us? About this?" His hand gestured vaguely between them, a fragile thread in the tapestry of secrets. Oliver cupped his chin, tilting it up with a gentleness that belied his rough edges. "Then we face it. Together. You're not weak, Eli. You're the strongest damn person I know, carrying all this weight without breaking." Their lips met then, soft and urgent, a stolen moment in the heart of enemy territory. Elijah melted into it, fingers tangling in Oliver's shirt, chasing the warmth that chased away the cold knot of dread. But moments like these were fleeting in Millwood. By morning, the incident with the dog had twisted into town gossip. Harlan's shot fired not just into the night but into the fragile peace Elijah clung to. At breakfast, over grits and bacon that tasted like ash, Harlan fixed him with a stare that could curdle milk. "World's full of threats. Boy, you gotta draw a line sometime. Protect what's yours." Elijah nodded, fork scraping his plate, the words lodging in his throat like buckshot. Protect what's yours. If only his father knew what or who that truly was. The days blurred into a tense rhythm after that. Elijah threw himself into the farm work, dawn to dusk under the relentless Georgia sun, hoping sweat would drown the whispers in his head. Oliver kept his distance, their rendezvous reduced to hurried texts and late-night drives to the quarry's edge, where they'd park and talk for hours, windows fogged with breath and possibility. Oliver dreamed big, talked of packing up, heading north to New York or maybe San Francisco, where men like them could walk hand in hand without the weight of judgment. "We could start over," he'd say, tracing patterns on Elijah's palm. "You and me against the world." But Elijah's roots ran deep, tangled in the soil like kudzu. His mama, Clara, with her soft hymns and calloused prayers, was the glue holding the Harpers together since his older brother, Jed, shipped off to Afghanistan and never came back whole, haunted by ghosts that turned him to the bottle. Then there was little sister, Becca, 16 and sharp as a switchblade, idolizing Elijah in ways that made his heart swell and splinter. Leaving meant unraveling them all, and the guilt gnawed at him fiercer than any family scorn. One sweltering Friday, as thunderheads gathered like uninvited guests, Oliver showed up unannounced with a six-pack and a sketchpad. "Thought we could use a break," he said, flashing that crooked grin that lit Elijah up from the inside. They retreated to the hayloft, the air thick with dust motes and the sweet rot of alfalfa, and for a while, it was just them, Oliver sketching Elijah's profile against the rafters, his pencil strokes capturing the curve of his jaw, the quiet fire in his hazel eyes. "You're beautiful. You know that," Oliver murmured, setting the pad aside to pull Elijah close. Their bodies fit like puzzle pieces worn smooth by time, kisses deepening into something raw and reverent. Elijah's hands roamed Oliver's back, mapping the ridges of old scars from a childhood marred by a father's belt, and in those touches, he found absolution for his own silences. But paradise in Millwood was always one creek away from ruin. As they lay tangled in the hay, breaths sinking like a shared heartbeat. A voice shattered the idyll, sharp and accusatory. "Elijah, that you up there?" "Clara." Her footsteps climbed the ladder, each rung a tolling bell. Panic surged through Elijah like iced lightning. "Oliver, hide. Please." He scrambled for his shirt, heart jackhammering, while Oliver melted into the shadows behind a bale stack, silent as a specter. Clara's head poked over the edge, her face a mask of concern etched with lines from too many sleepless nights. "Baby?" I heard voices. "Everything all right?" "Yeah, Mama. Just reading." Out loud. Elijah forced a laugh, clutching his book like a shield, a worn copy of Walt Whitman's Leaves of Grass, the irony bitter on his tongue. She climbed fully, settling on a bale with a sigh that carried the weight of harvests past. "You work too hard, Eli. And that friend of yours, Oliver? He comes around more than a shadow these days." Her eyes, the same hazel as his, probed gently. "He's a good boy, I suppose. But a mama worries." Elijah's throat tightened. "He's just helping out with the farm." Clara reached for his hand, her grip warm and unyielding. "Family's all we got in this life. Don't let outsiders pull you away from that." The words landed like a benediction and a brand, searing the divide between love and loyalty. As she descended, Elijah exhaled shakily, waving Oliver out from hiding. But the moment had fractured something, the stolen breaths now tainted with the specter of discovery. "We can't keep doing this," Elijah said, voice hollow. "It's not fair to you." Oliver's jaw set, a storm brewing in those dark eyes. "Fair? Eli, love ain't about fair. It's about fighting for what's real." He pulled Elijah into a fierce embrace, but even as their lips brushed, Elijah felt the noose of Millwood tightening. That night, sleep evaded him, chased away by dreams of shotguns and splintered doors. Dawn broke gray and unforgiving, and with it came Harlan's truck rumbling back from town, earlier than usual. Elijah was in the kitchen, nursing coffee black as his mood, when his father burst in, face thunderous, clutching a crumpled flyer like it was contraband. "Explain this," Harlan growled, slamming it on the table. The paper was from the local library's bulletin board, a call for submissions to a Pride Poetry Night in Atlanta. Elijah's name scribbled in the margin next to a Whitman quote about loving boldly. Elijah's blood turned to ice. "It's nothing, Dad. Just an idea." Harlan's eyes narrowed, veins bulging in his neck. "Pride? You messing with that filth now? After all we've taught you?" The word hung there, laced with disgust, and Elijah saw it then, the chasm widening, the truth he'd guarded like a flame in the wind flickering perilously close to extinction. The flyer burned a hole in Elijah's pocket all day, a talisman of rebellion he couldn't quite summon the courage to wield. Harlan's rage simmered like a pot left too long on the stove, erupting in grunts and slammed cabinet doors, while Clara moved through the house like a ghost, her silence louder than any sermon. Becca, bless her, picked up on the undercurrent, shooting Elijah worried glances over her cereal bowl before bolting for the school bus. "You okay, Eli?" she whispered at the door, her braids swinging like pendulums. "Yeah, kiddo. Go learn something." He ruffled her hair, forcing a smile that felt like cracking porcelain. But as the bus pulled away, leaving dust devils in its wake, Elijah felt the isolation settle heavier than the humidity. He texted Oliver from the barn, fingers flying over the keys. Trouble. Dad found the flyer. Thinks it's filth. Need you. The response came swift. On my way. Hold the line. Oliver arrived as the sun dipped low, painting the fields in strokes of amber and regret. They met by the creek that bordered the property, a ribbon of lazy water where Elijah used to skip stones as a boy, dreaming of worlds beyond the levee. Now, it was their sanctuary, the willows draping like veils to shield their confessions. Oliver didn't waste words. He pulled Elijah down onto the bank, their backs against a gnarled oak, and let the silence stretch until it snapped. Tell me everything. So Elijah did, the flyer's innocent origin. A whim from a late-night scroll through Atlanta events. The way Harlan's face had twisted like he'd swallowed vinegar. He didn't say it outright, but I saw it in his eyes. The suspicion. Like he knows, well, or he's starting to. Oliver's arm tightened around his shoulders, a bulwark against the tide. Then let's give him something to suspect for real. Come with me to that poetry night. Read your words. Let Atlanta see the man I fell for. Elijah's laugh was half-sob, muffled against Oliver's neck. You make it sound easy. Like I can just flip a switch and be brave. You are brave, Eli. Every day you wake up here, you fight a war nobody else sees. Oliver's voice was a low rumble, vibrating through them both. He tilted Elijah's chin up, their foreheads touching, breaths mingling in the cooling air. Remember that night at the mill? When you kissed me first? That took guts. The memory flooded back. Moonlight silvering the water, the creak of rusted beams. Elijah's heart a wild drum as he closed the distance, tasting salt and stardust on Oliver's lips. It had been terror and triumph intertwined, the first crack in his armored silence. I was terrified, Elijah admitted, tracing the line of Oliver's collarbone through his tea. And you did it anyway. Oliver's kiss was slow, deliberate, promise etched in the press of mouths. They sank into the grass, hands exploring with the reverence of lovers who knew time was a thief. Oliver's fingers unbuttoned Elijah's shirt, mapping the freckles across his chest like constellations, while Elijah's palms slid under denim, eliciting gasps that echoed the frog chorus. It was making love under open sky, raw and unhurried, Elijah arching into touches that whispered you are enough. Afterward, spent and sated, they lay tangled, Oliver's head on Elijah's chest, listening to the steady thump that said I'm still here. Promise me you'll think about it, Oliver murmured, fingers idly stroking Elijah's side. The reading. For us. Elijah stared at the darkening canopy, fireflies winking like hesitant allies. I promise. But promises in Millwood were fragile as eggshells. Saturday brought church, the white-clabbered steeple a sentinel over sins unspoken. The Harpers filed into their pew, Harlan's jaw set like granite, Clara's hand fluttering to her throat during the hymn. Reverend Tate's sermon that week was on Sodom and Gomorrah, fire raining from judgmental skies, and Elijah felt every word like a lash across his soul. He bowed his head, mouthing amens through gritted teeth, while Oliver's text buzzed in his pocket. Thinking of you. Survive this. Lunch at Auntie's diner afterward was the real trial. Extended family crammed into vinyl booths, gossip flowing freer than sweet tea. Uncle Ray, Harlan's brother, clapped Elijah on the back too hard. Heard you got some fancy writing notions, nephew. Better stick to plowin'. World's tough on dreamers. Harlan chuckled, but it was edged with warning. Boys got responsibilities here. Family first. Elijah nodded, fork spearing a limp fry, the weight of their expectations pressing down. Becca, squeezed beside him, kicked his shin under the table, a secret signal. Don't let M win. She was the only one who knew fragments of the truth, pieced together from overheard whispers and Elijah's evasive smiles. 14. She'd cornered him in the barn one twilight. You like boys, don't you? Like in that movie we watched. Her acceptance had been a bomb. Fierce and unfiltered. Then fight for it, dummy. Like Mom fights for us. Back home. The afternoon stretched lazy and oppressive. Elijah escaped to the attic. A dusty area of forgotten relics. Jed's old football helmet. Mama's hope chest. Boxes of letters yellowed with time. He unearthed his notebook. Pages filled with verses that bled honesty. Lines about loving in the margins. About hearts too full for small-town cages. Flipping to a blank sheet, he scrawled furiously, the pen a lifeline. In the hush of harvest, I stand at the edge, roots pulling down, wings begging flight. Your hand in mine, a scandal and a prayer, whispering, rise, before the storm devours the light. The words flowed like creek water after rain, cathartic and fierce. By dusk, he'd crafted a poem for the Atlanta night, Stand Between, a tapestry of their love woven with the thorns of family fealty. Folding it carefully, he slipped it into his pocket beside the flyer, resolve hardening like mortar. Oliver picked him up at the county road's end, headlights cutting the twilight. You came, he said, grin splitting wide as they peeled toward the highway. Couldn't let you go alone. Elijah leaned over the console, stealing a kiss at a stoplight, the thrill of rebellion sparking brighter than the dash glow. Atlanta unfolded like a fever dream, neon veins pulsing through Midtown, the air electric with possibility. The venue was a cozy bookstore cafe, shelves groaning under tomes of queer icons. Baldwin, Woolf, Lord. The crowd was a mosaic, tattooed poets with rainbow pins, silver-haired couples holding hands, young activists with signs that read love wins. Elijah's pulse thrummed as they found seats near the mic. Oliver's thigh pressed warm against his. When his name was called, Elijah's legs felt like jelly, but Oliver's squeeze, you've got this, propelled him forward. The spotlight bathed him in gold, and as he unfolded the paper, the room hushed. His voice, steady at first, then swelling with the rhythm of revelation, poured out the words. They called me weak, a whisper in the wind, but love forged steel in these trembling hands. Between blood and bone, I choose the fire, your eyes, my truth, our defiant stand. The snap of applause crashed over him like waves, but it was Oliver's face, proud, teary, a light that anchored him. They tumbled out into the night afterward, laughter bubbling free, hands linked openly on the sidewalk. In a dive bar nearby, over cheap whiskey, they toasted to beginnings, Oliver's foot hooked around Elijah's ankle under the table. That was magic, Eli. Pure magic, but magic has a half-life in the South. As they drove back, the radio crackling with country laments, Elijah's phone lit up. Becca, Dad's on a tear. Come home quick. Something about Jed's letters. The bottom dropped out. Jed's letters, sealed bundles from his deployment, unopened since his return, stashed in the attic like Pandora's box. Harlan had found them that afternoon, prying into the past Elijah had guarded as fiercely as his present. They arrived to chaos. Harlan in the living room, papers scattered like fallen soldiers, face purple with fury. Clara hovered, wringing her apron, while Becca perched on the stairs, eyes wide. Eli, Harlan bellowed as the door swung open, "You've been lying to us. About everything." The letters spilled secrets, not just Jed's war horrors, but hints of his own hidden loves, a brother's unspoken queerness that mirrored Elijah's own. Harlan's betrayal cut deepest. He'd known, buried it, let the poison fester until it poisoned them all. "You think you're protecting us?" Harlan roared, waving a yellowed page. This filth from your brother? And now you, prancing off to those devil meetings." Oliver stepped forward, hand on Elijah's arm, but Elijah shook him off, stepping into the fray. "It's not filth, Dad. It's us. Me. Jed. We're your blood. Same as always." The room spun, accusations flying like shrapnel, and in the melee, Elijah saw the fracture lines, years of silence cracking under truth's weight. The argument raged like a brush fire, consuming the living room in a haze of shouted Bible verses and crumpled letters. Harlan paced like a caged bull, veins throbbing in his temples, each stomp shaking the floorboards that had borne witness to decades of Harper silences. "I buried this for your mama's sake," he snarled, jabbing a finger at the scattered pages. Jed was lost to the desert madness. "Ain't no excuse for turning his back on God and family." Clara's sobs punctuated the tirade, her hands clutching a rosary that dangled like a noose. "Harlan, please." The boy's hurting enough, but her eyes on Elijah held a new shadow, betrayal mingled with dawning grief, as if she'd suspected the shape of his heart but never the depth of its divergence. Elijah stood rooted, chest heaving, Oliver a solid presence at his flank. The air thickened with the scent of spilled coffee and old ink, the letter's revelations hanging spectral. Jed's coded confessions to a fellow soldier, loves kindled in foxholes and snuffed by fear, echoes of Elijah's own clandestine nights. "You buried it?" Elijah's voice cracked, raw as exposed wire. "You let him suffer alone, Dad. And me, calling me weak when all I was doing was surviving the same hell." Harlan whirled, face crumpling into something feral. "Surviving? This ain't survival. Boy, it's surrender. To sin. To that." His gaze flicked to Oliver, venom sharpening. "To him. I seen how you two look at each other. Sneaking around like thieves in my own house." Oliver stiffened, stepping half in front of Elijah, his voice a controlled thunder. "With respect, sir, that's not thieving. That's loving. Something your family could stand to learn." The slap came swift, Harlan's palm cracking across Oliver's cheek, the sound a gunshot in the close quarters. Time fractured, Becca's gasp, Clara's cry, Elijah lunging forward with a roar he didn't know he possessed. "Don't you touch him." He shoved his father back, the force surprising them both, Harlan stumbling into the armchair with a grunt. The room froze, combatants in tableau, Elijah's fists clenched, knuckles white, Oliver rubbing his reddening jaw, Harlan's eyes wide with shock that morphed to fury. "Get out," Harlan hissed, rising like Lazarus from the dead. "Both of you. Out of my house. Out of my sight." Clara's plea broke the spell. "Harlan, no." But Elijah was already moving, grabbing Oliver's hand, the touch electric in the storm. "Come on." They fled to the porch, the screen door slamming like final judgment, crickets mocking their exodus with indifferent song. In the truck, engine roaring to life, Elijah's tears came hot and unbidden, streaking the dust on his cheeks. Oliver drove in silence, one hand on the wheel, the other clasped over Elijah's knee, a tether in freefall. They ended up at the quarry, moon-silvered water a black mirror below the cliffs. Oliver killed the engine, and they climbed out, boots crunching gravel, until they perched on the tailgate, shoulders brushing. "I'm sorry," Elijah whispered, voice swallowed by the night. "For dragging you into this mess." Oliver turned, the moonlight carving shadows on his bruised face. "Hey. None of that. I'd walk through fire for you, Eli. You know that." His fingers brushed the sting on his jaw, then cupped Elijah's face, thumbs wiping away salt tracks. "Besides, you stood up. For real this time. That's the man I love." The kiss that followed was desperate, a clash of need and ache, tongues tangling as if words failed them. Elijah poured his fracture into it, the fear, the fury, the fierce bloom of their bond. They made love there on the truck bed, urgent and unadorned, clothes shed in a frenzy, bodies slick with sweat and starlight. Oliver moved with a tenderness edged in steel, whispering praises against Elijah's skin. "So strong. So mine." Elijah arched into him, nails digging crescents into broad backs, chasing oblivion in the rhythm of hips and heartbeats. Dawn crept in rosy-fingered, finding them entwined under a borrowed blanket from the cab, the world reduced to the rise-fall of breaths. But reality intruded with Elijah's phone, Becca's text, Mama's crying. Dad locked himself in the garage. "Come back, please." Guilt twisted like barbed wire. "I can't leave her in that," Elijah said, sitting up, the blanket pooling around his waist. Oliver nodded, no judgment in his eyes, only understanding. "Then go. But not alone. I'm with you." They returned to a house shrouded in uneasy truce. Harlan's truck was gone, off to the fields or the bottle. Elijah couldn't guess. Clara met them at the door, face puffy but resolute, Becca peeking from the hallway. "Eli, we need to talk." Her voice was a bridge, tentative over the chasm. In the kitchen, over reheated coffee that tasted of burnt resolve, the unraveling began. Clara gathered the letters, smoothing them like fragile relics. "Your brother. He wrote these to me once, before he stopped. Said he was scared of the war, of himself. I burned one, thought it best. But now," she trailed off, eyes glistening, "I see you in him, baby." The hiding, Elijah's throat bobbed. "Mama, I never meant to hurt you." She reached across the table, her hand covering his callous palm to callous palm. "Hurt's part of loving deep. But silence, that's the real killer." Becca chimed in, fierce as a spitfire. "Yeah, Dad's an ass. But you're not weak, Eli. You're like a tree, bends but don't break." The words landed soft, mending fractures Elijah hadn't named. Oliver, silent sentinel at his side, squeezed his thigh under the table, a private anchor. Harlan returned at noon, reeking of whiskey and defeat, collapsing into his chair without a word. The standoff stretched taut, minutes ticking like a fuse. Finally, Clara broke it. "Harlan Harper, you listen now. This family's frayed enough without you swinging that temper like a scythe. He grunted, avoiding eyes, but when Elijah slid Jed's letters toward him, the old man paused, fingers hovering. Read 'em, Dad. All of 'em. See your son, the real one. Hours passed in that vigil, Harlan's lips moving silently over the pages, color draining from his face with each line. Dusk fell, fireflies igniting the yard like hesitant hopes. When he finally looked up, eyes red-rimmed, voice gravel. I failed him. And you, the admission cracked the dam. Elijah crossed the room, kneeling by his father's chair, the pose of supplication twisted into something equal. We all failed, in ways. But we can fix it. Starting now. Harlan's hand, trembling, found his shoulder, not a shove, but a grip, weathered and real. That boy, a nod to Oliver, who stood watchful by the door. He treat you right? Better than right, Elijah said, voice steady. He sees me, a nod, grudging but genuine. Then, stay close. Both of you. We got mendin' to do. It wasn't absolution, not yet. But it was a foothold, the first step from abyss to ascent. The weeks that followed were a delicate dance, Millwood's rhythms interrupted by small rebellions. Elijah read at the library's open mic, his voice carrying stand between, to a crowd that snapped and cheered, Harlan's truck idling outside, not intruding, but present. Oliver integrated slowly, helping with harvests, his sketches adorning the barn walls, portraits of the Harpers, fierce and flawed, in charcoal strokes that captured their humanity. Nights belonged to them, lazy sprawls in Oliver's apartment above the hardware store, where they cooked gumbo from Clara's recipe and made love with the windows open to the stars. I love you, Elijah would murmur into the hollow of Oliver's throat, the words no longer a risk but a ritual. I love you back, Oliver always replied, pulling him closer. Always, but shadows lingered. Becca confided one afternoon, while shelling peas on the porch, Dad's trying, but Uncle Ray's been whispering. Says you're corrupting us. And there's talk in town about Jed's letters leaking somehow. Elijah's blood chilled. Leaking? Harlan had burned the originals after that night. Or so he'd sworn. Paranoia crept in, a serpent in the garden they'd begun to tend. The betrayal struck on a crisp October eve, leaves turning trader gold. Elijah came home from a supply run to find the farmhouse swarming, sheriff's deputies milling, neighbors gawking from pickups. Clara rushed out, face ashen. Eli, it's Harlan. He's been arrested. The charge: embezzlement from the co-op, funds siphoned for years to cover Jed's medical bills, debts buried deeper than regrets. But worse, the letters, Jed's originals, had surfaced in Ray's hands, twisted into blackmail fodder. Uncle Ray, Harlan's own blood, had sold the family secrets to the highest bidder, leveraging them to force Harlan's confession, pocketing the difference in a web of greed. Rage boiled in Elijah's veins, hot and unyielding. That son of a... Clara gripped his arm. He thought he was protecting us from the truth getting out. But Ray, he used it against your daddy. Oliver arrived in the fray, wrapping Elijah in a hug that smelled of turpentine and resolve. We'll fight this. All of it. But as deputies led Harlan away in cuffs, his eyes meeting Elijah's through the cruiser window, pleading, broken, Elijah felt the old weakness stir. stand between family and truth? Now it was a battlefield, and he was the general, armed only with love's fragile blade. The jailhouse smelled of bleach and broken promises, a sterile tomb where Harlan sat hunched in orange scrubs. The man who'd once loomed like a southern oak now diminished to a felled branch. Elijah visited alone that first afternoon, Oliver waiting in the truck with Becca, giving space for the raw calculus of blood. Through the plexiglass divider, Harlan's voice crackled over the phone line, thin as smoke. Didn't want you boys knowin' how deep the hole went. Jed's treatments. They bled us dry. Ray promised to help cover, but he turned snake. Elijah pressed the receiver harder, as if it could bridge the gulf. And the letters? You let him use Jed's soul like currency? Harlan's eyes, bloodshot and hollow, dropped. Thought it was leverage. Keep the family quiet. But he flipped it, fed the co-op board the embezzlement tale, made me the villain to save his hide. A bitter laugh escaped. Your uncle. Blood thicker than mud. Turns out, the betrayal gnawed, a canker in Elijah's gut. Ray, with his backslaps and false piety, had always been the golden child, Harlan's shadow, envious and scheming. Now, he'd weaponized their pain, twisting love letters into nooses. We'll get you out, Dad. Lawyer up. Fight. Harlan's hand flattened against the glass, mirroring Elijah's. You already fightin' enough battles, son. This one might break what's left, but Elijah wouldn't yield. Back home, he rallied the fractured front. Clara poring over bank statements by lamplight, Becca researching bail funds on her laptop with a ferocity that belied her years. Oliver became the strategist, his graphic design eye spotting discrepancies in the co-op's ledgers that pointed to Ray's deeper involvement. Falsified invoices, diverted shipments. This ain't just embezzlement, Oliver said late one night, papers strewn across the kitchen table like battlefield maps. It's fraud, plain and simple. Ray's the puppet master. Elijah nodded, exhaustion etching lines around his eyes. But Oliver's presence, steady, unyielding, fueled him. They worked in tandem, Elijah's poetic precision complementing Oliver's visual acuity, uncovering a trail of deceit that snaked back years. Stolen moments punctuated the grind, Oliver pulling him into the pantry for a quick, grounding kiss, or Elijah tracing tattoos on Oliver's forearm while they pored over documents, whispering, couldn't do this without you, yet the strain frayed edges. Whispers in Millwood swelled to a roar, townies crossing streets to avoid Clara. Graffiti scrawled on the barn, Harper Queer's steel souls. Becca came home bruised from schoolyard taunts, her idolization of Elijah now a target. They say Dad's in jail cause of you, she sobbed into his shoulder one evening, small frame shaking. That you're the curse. Elijah held her tighter, heart splintering. I'm no curse, Bex. I'm just me. And that's enough. But doubt crept, insidious as kudzu, whispering he was the weak link, dragging them all under. The high point came midweek. A fragile victory, Elijah's poem, submitted anonymously to the Atlanta Journal-Constitution's op-ed page, published under the title Between Blood and Bone. It chronicled the Harpers' unraveling, not naming names, but evoking the universal ache of hidden truths, family as both anchor and chain. Responses flooded in, letters of solidarity from queer Southerners, donations to a hastily set-up legal fund. Even Reverend Tate called, voice gruff, stirred something in the flock. Boy, Keep standin'. Emboldened, Elijah confronted Ray at the co-op, the air heavy with diesel and deceit. Uncle Ray leaned against a grain silo, cigar chomping smugly, his paunch straining overalls. Nephew. Come to beg. Elijah's fists balled, but he held steady, Oliver's advice echoing, words first. Always. I know what you did. The letters. The setups. Jed deserved better. We all do. Ray's laugh was oil slick. Better? Boy. Family's about survival. Your daddy weakened us. Hide in his shame. Yours. I fixed it. Fixed. Elijah stepped closer. Voice steel-wrapped silk. You profited off pain. But the truth's out now. And it'll bury you. Ray's smirk faltered, eyes darting as Elijah revealed printouts, Oliver's annotated proofs of the fraud. Co-op boards got these. Sheriff's next. The bluff landed. Ray blanched, cigar dropping to the dirt. You wouldn't. Family first. Right? Elijah turned on his heel, walking away with the power shift humming in his veins. It wasn't justice yet, but it was momentum. That night, victory tasted bittersweet. Oliver cooked steak on the porch grill, Clara's collards steaming beside, Becca chattering about a school project on civil rights heroes. You're mine now. Eli. Harlan called from jail. Voice lighter. Heard about the poem. Proud. Son. Real proud. Under the harvest moon, Elijah and Oliver slipped away to the creek. The waters murmur a lullaby. They waded in fully clothed, laughter echoing as shirts clung transparent, hands roaming slick skin. You were magnificent today, Oliver said, backing Elijah against a smooth boulder, water lapping at their waists. His mouth trailed fire down Elijah's neck, teeth grazing collarbone, eliciting shivers that had nothing to do with chill. Elijah's fingers knotted in wet hair, pulling Oliver up for a kiss that drowned the world. Deep, devouring, a sacrament of salt and desire. They shed sodden layers, bodies pressing urgent in the shallows, Oliver lifting him effortlessly, legs wrapping as thrusts met the current's rhythm. It was cathartic, climactic, Elijah crying out Oliver's name to the indifferent stars, release crashing like waves on hidden shores. Floating after, limbs entwined in the lazy drift, Elijah traced Oliver's jaw. What if we lose? All of it. Oliver's smile was a beacon. Then we build new. But we won't lose. Not with you leading. The apex shattered at dawn. A deputy's knock. Ray had lawyered up, countersuing for defamation, claiming the letters were forgeries. Elijah's poem libelous agitprop. The co-op board, spooked, froze the fund. Harlan's bail denied pending investigation. Whispers turned to howls. A brick through the living room window, shattering glass and Clara's fragile peace. Elijah found her sweeping shards, tears carving tracks through dust. Mama, go, she said, voice fierce through quiver. Take Becca, Oliver. Run before it consumes you all. But Elijah knelt, gathering pieces with her. No. We stand. Together. The crisis peaked that afternoon in the town square. Millwood's heart, a weathered gazebo ringed by magnolias, site of lynching echoes long buried. Ray had called a family meeting, but it was a spectacle. Townsfolk gathered, Bibles clutched like shields, Reverend Tate presiding like a reluctant judge. Ray stood on the steps, megaphone in hand, painting the Harpers as moral lepers, embezzlers, deviants, destroyers of Southern values. Elijah arrived last, Oliver at his side, Becca clutching Clara's hand. The crowd parted uneasily, murmurs rippling like wind through wheat. Ray's eyes gleamed triumph. See, even the weak one shows. But weakness spreads. Elijah ascended the steps, voice amplified by sheer will. Enough, the word boomed, halting the drone. He pulled the letters from his jacket, photocopies, annotated with Oliver's proofs. Read for yourselves. Not Ray's lies, but truth. My brothers, my families. We're not weak, we're human. Loving, hurting, fighting the same as you. Gasps, shifts. Becca cheered, small fist pumping. Oliver's hand found his, public and proud, a gauntlet thrown. Ray lunged, snatching for the papers, but Elijah held firm, the crowd's murmur swelling to debate, sympathy stirring in unlikely faces. Sheriff arrived then, cuffs glinting, Ray's empire crumbling under warrants served. Your proof held, son, the lawman muttered to Elijah. Ray's singing already, full confession. The square exhaled, a collective unpocketing of grace. Harlan's release processed by nightfall, the old man stepping into Clara's arms. Eyes on Elijah. You stood, boy, between us and the dark. But victory's afterglow dimmed with a shadow. Oliver, pulling Elijah aside in the chaos, face ashen. Eli, I gotta tell you something. The words that followed gutted him. Oliver's freelance gig? Cover. He'd been investigating Ray for months, undercover for an Atlanta PI firm, tipped off by Jed's old army buddy about the fraud. The letters? Oliver had obtained copies early, using them to bait the trap. I didn't know it'd hit your family this hard. Thought I was helping. Helping, Elijah recoiled, betrayal a fresh wound. You played us. Me. Like pawns. Oliver's plea cracked. I love you, Eli. This was before. Before what? Before you knew my heart was the collateral. Elijah stormed off, the creek calling like a siren's wail. The creek ran colder that night, this babble a mocking chorus to Elijah's unraveling. He sat on the bank, knees drawn up, the water's edge lapping at his boots like insistent regrets. Oliver's confession echoed. Undercover, bait, before us each syllable a thorn embedding deeper. Love seemed war disguises in Millwood, and Elijah, ever the fool, had mistaken shadows for solidity. Footsteps crunched behind him, but he didn't turn. Oliver's voice, hoarse with desperation, sliced the dark. Eli, please. Let me explain. Explain. Elijah whipped around, eyes blazing in the moonlight. You waltzed into my life with sketches and sweet talk, all while spinning webs around my family. Jed's letters, God. Oliver, you dangled them like bait. How do I trust that wasn't part of the act? Oliver dropped to his knees in the mud, close but not touching, hands outstretched in supplication. It wasn't an act. The job started 6 months ago. Ray's name on a cold case file. Small-town corruption. I came here to dig. Yeah. But you. You were the lightning strike. That poetry slam. Your words, they undid me. I pulled back on the investigation the second we kissed. Swore I'd wrap it clean and walk away. Elijah's laugh was jagged glass. Walk away? You fed me hope. Let me build dreams on your lies. And now, my dad's free because of it. But at what cost? Becca's taunted. Mama's shattered, we're the town joke. The queer thieves. Oliver inched closer, voice fracturing. I know. And I'd burn it all down if it fixed this. But I stayed for you, Eli. Fought for you. That slap from your dad? The nights holding you through nightmares? Real. Every damn second. The proximity was torment. Oliver's scent. His warmth. A siren's call Elijah both craved and cursed. He surged forward, shoving hard, but the momentum carried them tumbling into the shallows, water splashing cold shock. They grappled, half fight, half embrace, Elijah's fists pounding Oliver's chest until exhaustion won, dissolving into sobs against sodden cloth. I hate you, Elijah gasped, but the words lied, twisting into don't leave, as Oliver held him through the flood. I won't. Never. Oliver's lips brushed his temple, a vow sealed in river chill. They dragged themselves to the truck, dripping and done, driving in loaded quiet back to the farmhouse. Dawn painted the sky bruise purple as they climbed the porch, where Clara waited, coffee brewing like an olive branch. Talked to the Reverend, she said softly, handing mugs. He's organizing a town hall. For healing. Elijah nodded, numb but nodding. Becca bounded down, hugging him fierce. You're my hero, Eli. Screw the rest. Harlan emerged from the kitchen, bandaged pride and all, clapping Oliver on the shoulder, tentative, but there. Heard the truth of it. Oh, you, son. For bringing light to the dark. The absolution was patchwork, but it held. Days blurred into a mending montage. Town hall confessions. Ray's guilty plea netting restitution and a cell. The co-op purging its rot under new stewardship. Elijah's poem went viral in Southern lit circles. Invitations pouring in for readings from Savannah to Birmingham. He accepted one in Atlanta, Oliver at his side, not undercover, but overt, hands linked on the drive. Millwood softened by degrees. Neighbors dropped pies with apologies scrawled on notes. Reverend Tate quoted Whitman in sermon. A sly wink to Elijah's pew. Becca's school project won blue ribbon, My Brother's Stand, featuring Elijah's verses illustrated in crayon rainbows. But the true reconciliation brewed private, in the hayloft where it all ignited. One starlit eve, Elijah led Oliver there, notebook in hand. Wrote something new, he said, voice steady as the rafters. Settling cross-legged in the prickly embrace, he read, Betrayal's blade cuts swift, leaves scars like rivers, winding, deep, but carving paths to see. In your eyes, the storm breaks open mercy, and I, once weak, now stand whole, with thee. Oliver's breath hitched, tears tracking dust-streaked cheeks. Beautiful. Like you, he pulled Elijah close, the kiss a renaissance, slow, sacred, rebuilding what words had bruised. Clothes whispered away, bodies reacquainting in the golden hush, touches reverent as prayer. Oliver mapped old paths with new intent, lips and fingers worshipping freckles, eliciting moans that mingled with the wind's sigh. Elijah reciprocated, bold in his yielding, taking Oliver deep with a tenderness that transcended forgiveness, into unity, souls sinking like harvest moons. Climax crested gentle, a shared shudder under constellations peeking through slats, afterglow wrapping them in quiet communion. Marry me, Oliver murmured into the curve of Elijah's neck, the words a heartbeat's vow. Elijah lifted his head, hazel eyes locking obsidian. Yes. 1,000 times. The wedding was Millwood-made magic. A spring ceremony in the rose garden, Clara's blooms bursting defiant color. Harlan walked Elijah down the aisle, paved with petals and poetry pages. His grip firm, voice gruff, proud. Son. Every step, Becca scattered confetti, giggling through vows. The town turned out, Reverend Tate officiating with a sermon on love's manifold graces. Oliver, in a suit sharp as his sketches, took Elijah's hands under the arbor, rings glinting like promises forged in fire. I stand with you, he said, voice carrying, between truth and tempest. Always. And I with you, Elijah replied, sealing it with a kiss that tasted of home, sweet tea and storm-won peace. Years wove forward. The farm thrived under Elijah's stewardship, infused with Oliver's designs, solar panels on barns, a community art co-op in the old mill. Becca bloomed into advocacy, her college essays echoing Elijah's stand. Jed's letters, archived gently, became touchstones for support groups, turning pain to purpose. Elijah published a chapbook, Between, sales funding scholarships for queer Southern youth. Nights, in their loft-converted bedroom, he and Oliver made love like revolutionaries, passionate, playful, profound, bodies a testament to resilience. They called him weak once, in the cradle of conformity. But Elijah Harper stood between family and truth, love and loss, and in standing, lifted them all. In America's heartland, where roots run deep and winds howl wild, he proved, strength isn't in silence, but in the roar of becoming.